All right, YouTube. Michael Flynn has resigned. In other words, he was sacked and forced to resign. It seems by Mike Pence, actually. Naturally, the response from most elements of the media has been, "Oh, a massive scandal erupts in Trump's White House because he's so ineffective and doesn't know what he's doing." More like people were putting pressure on him to get rid of Flynn. Now, I thought Flynn was one of the more level-headed people there, but I think he appears to have made a significant mistake in talking to the Russians without letting Pence know what he was doing. It looks like Pence, on the strategy side, is responsible within the Trump administration for a great deal of coordination. So naturally, not telling him what you're going to do before you do it is probably not the greatest of ideas. And it's funny because Pence is seen as sort of the more soft-spoken kind of normal dude, and then Trump's the bombastic, sort of charismatic president. And so it was kind of interesting to see that Mike Pence is probably involved with forcing the resignation of this other inner circle member of the Trump cabinet, so to speak, this security advisor. Nonetheless, there was no other choice that could actually have been made. I would like to point out, though, for those who say that this is evidence of some systemic disregard for proper conduct within the Trump administration, of course, you'd be hard-pressed to find a presidential administration not racked with resignations over the span of time anyway. The fact that they let go of Flynn had more, I think, to do with the perception of those outside of the administration as opposed maybe to most people within it, other than maybe Pence himself. But, I mean, it's the right thing to do. If you think that somebody who's close to you within a political circle has a conflict of interest, even if there's no specific proof that there is one, if there's any belief that there's been a breach of decorum, so to speak, then you let them go. You have them resign or you fire them. I'm sure it would have been funnier if Trump had come out and said, "Oh, I have a major announcement." He just drags Pence up there and he just rants at him for a few minutes and then says, "Well, you're fired," and then lets him go and he does the walk of shame. But that's not exactly what would happen, because Flynn appears to be fairly close to Trump, in ideology, of course, and other ways. So I'm not surprised that he's gone, although in a way it's kind of sad because Flynn was one of the better people, honestly, that he had sort of in that inner circle. Then you have like DeVos, who's like, not really a fan. And then you have that Munchin or Nutchin or whatever the fuck his name is, dude. And it's like, oh, well, Goldman Sachs, hopefully he's just a turncoat who's going to go after the banks and corporatists. But we don't know exactly for sure whether that's going to happen. Then you have Sessions. It's like, that's okay. It's better than some of the people he was apparently thinking of, Mitt Romney for that position or something like that. But Trump's fans do need to realize no matter who Trump chooses to be around him, no matter who he puts in what position, they're going to get ridiculed by most of the media. It's just going to be the way that it works for some time to come. You'd need a fairly significant swing of public opinion in Trump's direction to convince even the more half-assed segments of the sort of the anti-Trump elements of the media to lay off him. And even then they might not, because, of course, they've devolved into clickbaiting, primarily. So something that happens, it's like when he was there at the MaraLago, and he was getting briefed there, and there were guests, who don't necessarily have security clearance around him. Everyone assumed, oh, well, he's getting top-secret information in front of people who shouldn't be privy to top-secret information. Yes, because I'm sure that everyone connected with Trump in a security aspect doesn't know what they're doing. They're all so utterly, totally inept that they allowed people to overhear top-secret intelligence in an unsecured area. It's not like they've set up, any sort of national security system at the MaraLago. They couldn't possibly have thought of that beforehand. It couldn't be that the guests were vetted to make sure that they're not like communist agents or something. I would like to believe government's typically inefficient and inept, but it's not that inefficient and inept. Never. So I don't have a problem with that. And you look, that got knocked out of the news cycle by the Michael Flynn stuff. So I think in a way it worked well for Trump. I think that would have been a bigger story to the media, but they got distracted by the fact that somebody had resigned from their position connected with Trump. So then he must have had a chuckle, because does it really matter if it's Michael Flynn? No, not really. A qualified individual, in my opinion. One that I thought was better than many of the people he surrounds himself with, but not exactly an indispensable asset to the Trump campaign or to the Trump administration or anything like that. One of Trump's, essentially, debate attack dogs that he dragged out to put before the media. And not exactly the most hardline right-winger either, which might, honestly, if we assume that Pence really is an ideologue and not just joking, maybe his main problem with Flynn was on foreign policy suggestions, and this is being used as an excuse to get rid of him or something like that, which would be mildly concerning. There's no reason to believe that yet, as of the moment, but it's at least a plausible theory as opposed to Russia, because it looks like no law was broken by Flynn, it seems. No significant policy was broken. There was no significant lack of good conduct on Flynn's part. It had to do predominantly with perception. My guess, though, is that the Trump White House hasn't really cared about perception that much anyway, so unless they have reason to believe that something larger went on with Flynn, which would be concerning. Unless they believe that, I would boil this perhaps down to Mike Pence pushing his weight around a little bit to get some concessions from people that he happens to deeply disagree with. And Pence would be more on that neocon side, honestly. Or not neocon, but sort of kind of a neocon, also kind of just a conservative traditionalist of sorts in an idealistic sense. I don't exactly know what that dude's game is, and I don't even like Mike Pence. I'm not taken in by his soft-spoken attitude. Trump's bombast is a veil that hides someone who is deeply reasonable. No, he's not insane. He's not unbalanced, and he knows what he's doing when he does it. It's all part of his strategy. It makes him look like he's a chaos candidate without actually being a particularly chaotic persona, other than to keep your foes and your opponents in a political and maybe foreign policy sense on their toes. I think he's doing this to Israel right now to fairly good effect. Mike Pence, on the other hand, doesn't engage in that. He's sort of, Trump goes in, lays waste to something. Pence goes in, pulls it back, and then issues what you would consider a sane or a normal political response and sort of restores order, so to speak. He is valuable to Trump in a strategy sense. As to whether his power goes further than that, is this going to be sort of a Cheney-Bush White House where the vice president is taking on a considerable role in all elements of domestic and foreign policy? Number one, I hope not, because I don't like Mike Pence. Number two, I don't think so, because Trump, as far as I can tell, he doesn't have the personality, and I mean without the veil, without the bombast, but the essence of his personality. I don't think he could deal with somebody who wanted to have significant influence over Trump outside of that sort of advisory sense. I think Trump is indeed running the show. I don't think Pence is. If he is, though, that would be concerning, because it means Trump is a little more than a charismatic figurehead, which is great for negotiating. He'd still potentially do a good job on that token. But his ideas are what people elected, not the ideas of Mike Pence, who verbally sparred with Trump's ideals in several ways before Trump actually took him on as his running mate. So Flynn's gone. Not a particularly large scandal, although you've got to understand, anything that Trump does is going to be scrutinized at an order of magnitude greater a level than Obama or Bush or somebody like that was ever scrutinized at. And the reason why that's being done is he didn't suck the media's teats. He didn't take all of their money and didn't give them lucrative kickbacks and is still hardballing them. And so they don't like him. They're corporate entities and they happen not to like him. It would be like wondering why the coal miners union wasn't glowingly in praise of Obama, why they ran him down constantly. Well, because he's no friend to your industry. Well, Trump is no friend to the corporate media industry. And that's what these firms are. It's not, some random person is conducting a live stream on the internet, running a blog or something. These are corporate apparatuses. They're multi-million-dollar corporate endeavors, brick and mortar, bankers backing them and so forth. They're internationalist usually. They're not just limited to the U.S. media or anything like that. It's like yeah, I'm sure none of these news corporations are actually part of an international corporation, but they are. That's what they all are. I think sometimes people forget that fact. So Flynn's gone, not a big thing. I almost didn't want to even bother talking about it. I have bigger news for later today. Actually, I have multiple fairly substantial things to do today. Good times. That's about all. Peace out.